involved much. And so I'm here to be the chief troublemaker for AMATYC. I took a dive down a rabbit hole to an algebra textbook from 1878. It's apparently where the balance idea comes from. Do you think that millennials know what a balance is? I thought there were some fun problems in here. In particular, you might get a kick out of the first one, where only men voted.
Right.
How times have changed. The fish problem is also interesting. And in 138 years, it's kind of hard to tell whether that's the old textbook or the new textbook, but we certainly have some new technology that solves those old problems. And in that time, we've built self-driving cars, robots that do medicine, Watson, and computers we carry around in our hands. And yet, the algebra we teach is exactly the same. Well, maybe not exactly, we do functions now because we have graphing calculators, but we also live in a different world, and if you look at the problems in our modern textbooks, nobody would actually answer these in real life. If I wanted to answer this question, how wide is the television screen, I would Google it. If I wanted to know how far up the canyon I hiked, I would look at my phone or my Fitbit and see how far I had gone. This is a modern textbook. It doesn't look all that different from 138 years ago, and I can't help but think, if we were to go back in time and show those folks from 138 years ago what we can do now, would they still do algebra the same way? So I kind of got to thinking, what if we just started over and looked at every single topic we teach up through the STEM track, one by one, and considered what new stuff we've got to teach there. So there's lots of different ways of thinking that I think is really our intention when we teach these classes. We want them to learn problem solving, abstract thinking, critical thinking, procedural thinking, how to prove things, the types of things we really wish students had today. And in fact, a lot of the concepts we have in algebra are taught in modern day subjects. I don't know, it's probably too small to read here, but these are diagrams that show you functions, one-to-one, one-to-many, many-to-many from databases. This is text from structured query language, which is used pretty much universally throughout databases, and you'll see that there's not just reals and ints. There's tiny ints and small ints and floats and doubles and stuff we don't even touch on in algebra, but this is the math of the real world. In computer languages, the axes actually don't go the same way they go in algebra books. You start in the upper left-hand corner of the screen, and positive direction goes down and to the right. In Google and Excel, we have all sorts of formulas that are based on Boolean relationships, ands and ors, right? So all of that compound inequalities, nobody uses compound inequalities out there in the real world. They use inequalities in database queries and in programs. Here's the example I used yesterday. This comes from a programming language called R. And I put this in here because you'll notice that there are things like string concatenation, which also is kind of like terms. You can only concatenate things that are like variables. This is a process diagram from business, which would teach you a lot about what to do first, second, third, the relationships between things, etc. We have decision trees. These are fun ones, but I can tell you from the business world, we made these all the time to figure out the structure and workflow of departments and programs. Those seem relevant to students as well. And then finally, data visualizations are a great way to look at the world around us. None of these are the same. All of them would require interpretation, and this is the kind of stuff you're seeing in magazines and newspapers, but not really algebra books. So I think that these are all things we should have. So I'm kind of thinking that maybe there should be an Algebra 2.0, not a StatWays, not MathWays, but a STEM-based algebra that should really gather in some new topics, keep some of the old, the stuff that probably still is relevant. And so anyways, there you go. I'll just mic drop that. Bye.
All right, Ralph, lecture number 13.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ralph Padgett. I'm from Westmoreland County Community College in southwestern Pennsylvania. And one of the courses I teach is called Tech Math. Formerly, it's called Mathematics for the Technologies. You may teach a similar course called something else. Despite the word technology, our course is largely algebra-based and leans heavily on applications. The name can be misleading, and when I first started the class, I thought it was a blow-off math class, but it is tough. In addition to the students, I've seen good tutors struggle with this course, and faculty members shy away from it. In fact, I couldn't even get anybody to cover my class for me while I'm here. Our Tech Math is actually 2 4-credit courses that include geometry, lots of trig, vectors, complex numbers, exponentials, logarithms, analytic geometry, and all the algebra we can possibly stuff into it. It is a potential path to calculus, though not an ideal one. Yet is it transferable? This is the actual face of a transfer counselor. No is usually, they're confused too. No is usually, they say no because it's because of the name, not the content of the course. The students who take this course are typically displaced workers looking to retrain in the fields like welding, CAD, electronics, machining, or AAS students interested in mechanical or electrical engineering. To say they are underprepared is a euphemism. Anger, shock, and fear are more like it. They tell me they got to factor no stinking trinomial. Many of these students become overwhelmed and confused, ultimately apathetic. Here, the best student in the class is the one at least trying to hold his head up. When it comes to textbook, the definition of inadequate says it all when it comes there. Lacking the quality or quantity required, insufficient for a purpose. Yesterday I heard Kathleen only say that publishers don't do fads. So we need to get together, those of us who teach this, to let them know that there's a need for these texts. But without standards, or at least some kind of agreement, what do we include in the textbook? Where's the motivation that guides development and competition? What do we put in there? And those of us who teach this need to get together. Do you teach this course? Do you know anyone who does? What's important? Make a list, send it to me. If you have questions, include that in there too. Questions create a better understanding, as we all know. Have you been in touch with the industry lately? Their views and needs change, and we need to keep up with what they think is important. I have some questionnaires also for anybody who's interested in the industry as well. We need to refresh our connections between educators, administrators, and industry. We spend a lot of time trying to answer the question of how can we get our students employed. And one thing does seem to be sure, learning math in general does make people more employable. I've asked this question in my classes every semester, every year. I started since teaching math since 23 years ago, and I do not believe it's a coincidence. And employment and learning math go hand in hand. We need standards for Tech Math, but industry can be vague, administrators ignorant, and educators can be uninvolved. I believe we need to get educators together to get the best possible results. With all the talk we hear about pathways these days, especially here at AMATYC, how have Tech Math students been left adrift on their own? What better place to begin raising awareness for the situations? These students and the people who lead them need to know what they're getting into and where they can go with it. And I'm happy to gather data and compile ideas because we need good quality. I'm hoping to have collected enough data to present some cohesive ideas in San Diego next year. And as the motto says here, ideas happen here. Well, here is wherever you are. We're here now and ideas happen all the time. Let's ignite the Tech Math. That's my plan.
Tequila Tammy.
All right. I'm on medication. Not supposed to drink.
That never stopped me before, but. Okay, so I'm Tammy Marshall. I love that he showed San Diego. How many of you have seen me around? Tammy Marshall from Cuyamaca College on the San Diego LEC. All right, I'm to San Diego next year. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how I believe we can shake up our curriculum. So, high school math. You guys are all familiar with it. No surprises here. This is what the students go through, right? Algebra, sometimes they end in pre-calc, sometimes they do 4 years, sometimes they only do 3. So I propose an idea that we have them go through that whole thing and then we give them a test at the very end that covers everything they've done over that 4 years. Because we all know that we can take a test that covers 4 years worth of material, right? And if they pass that test, then they can go on to the next course. But only if they pass the test. If they don't pass the test, right, then they have to go all the way back to the beginning. So if they ended in pre-calculus, they have to go all the way back to pre-algebra maybe, or algebra 1. What do you guys think? Do you like it? Does it work? What do you think? No? No? Okay, well, maybe we can shake it up a little bit. Maybe what we can do instead is we say, you didn't totally fail. You just almost failed. Maybe you just almost passed, okay? So instead of going back all the way to the beginning, maybe you only have to go back 2 classes. Maybe you ended in pre-calculus, and we'll only make you go back to algebra 2, right? Does that make it better? No. What do you guys think? No, it doesn't make it better? Okay, well, I don't think it makes it better either. So here, I have another idea. We're going to add a couple of things, and we're going to give the students some credit for some of the things that they've done. Like, maybe they did really good in high school. They got a good high school GPA. So we're going to add 2 points. Now, if you guys know anything about Accuplacer, that doesn't really do much. But we're going to add 2 points. Or maybe it's only been 5 years since they graduated from high school, or 2 years, and so we'll add a couple of points. Does that make it any better? I mean, maybe they're lucky and that bumps them up a class. Maybe they took pre-calculus in high school and they get to take pre-calculus again. What do you think? Okay. Does it sound familiar to you? It should, because what I just described is our placement system, isn't it? I mean, that is what we do in California, and I suspect is what we do across the country, right? The students take all these classes in high school, they have to take one big test, and then, boom. So instead, I propose that we honor what the students did in high school. Because they're teachers too. They know what they're doing. The students did well. They got a good high school GPA, and they can do more than we give them credit for. So let's change our placement policies, right? Let's use the students' high school GPA. There's enough research out there. There's a huge study in Long Beach that was done that those of you that are from California know what was going on. And instead, let's eliminate these classes from our curriculum. We don't need to teach these. They're already being taught. We don't need to teach basic math, pre-algebra, or beginning algebra. We don't need to teach any of those classes because most of our students have already had them, right? So let's just eliminate them all from our classroom. Research shows us that less than 10%, at my college it's only 7%, of students who start in pre-algebra actually ever get through transfer level math. That's horrible. And for students of color or first generation students, it's even worse, right? They don't ever make it out. So instead, if they need a little support, let's give them co-recs, right? You guys have heard a lot. I mean, I've been to like 4 presentations already about co-recs, right? But let's do it, but not just for maybe one class. Let's do co-recs for a bunch of classes. Let's accelerate remediation for students for non-STEM. Some of you are doing Quant Way or Stout Way. In California, we're also doing the California Acceleration Project, the 3 stats, which we're doing at our college, right? So accelerate that remediation. Okay? This all boils down to basically 3 high-leverage strategies. Change your placement policies, right? Create co-requisite support and accelerate remediation. We don't need to have our students go through and do what they did in high school. Why do you think they're so frustrated? At Cuyamaca College, we started down this path. Starting this semester right now, we did this. We no longer teach pre-algebra, beginning algebra, or anything below intermediate algebra starting now. Our students all go in to intermediate algebra or above, all so that we can help deliver education's promise to our students. I challenge you to do the same. sing.
Uh-oh. Fred. Uh-oh.
Fred Feldon.
Damn, what happened? What? Hey, yeah. I hope you're next.
It says-
Mark is supposed to come before me. Well, at Coastline College, 85% of our enrollment is purely online. If you look in the classroom, hopefully no one in this room has any images that look similar to this. Oh, I think you.
Yeah.
Mark, I hope you're next. We know that if you hook up electrodes, scientific research can actually measure brain activity. And the high point are moments like watching TV or doing lab or taking a test or studying. And the low activity takes place, the lowest of all activity takes place in class. Eric Mazur, the physics professor from Harvard, is the one who first documented and promoted peer instruction, where he would deliver a lesson and students could explain it better to each other than he could explain it to them. Piaget and Vygotsky, everybody realized a long time ago that if a student is not actively involved in the learning process, the learning fails. We're lucky in the mathematics field because all we have to do is ask for an answer and then ask a student to volunteer. How'd you get it? Can you share your answer with us? What was a good first step? What was your next step? How'd you arrive at the answer? We basically can deviate away from the lecture and instead assign students more responsibility for learning content, because content is ubiquitous. It's everywhere. So here are some of the more popular online instructional resources available for free for all students. Students may resist. They may say, dude, I paid tuition. I paid you to lecture this content and deliver this content to me. But here's an example of an instructor who collected feedback at the end, and a student said, I realized that you can learn on your own. I've always learned on my own. I will learn on my own. It is possible. There are some caveats, though, and here's the first one. If you do something like flipping the classroom, I don't know about you guys, but I have walked down the hall and I have seen professors behind the podium checking email while their students are doing the math on the computer. I know that because I've received emails from professors during the time when they're supposed to be teaching class. Here's another guy who says it's not the content that it's important, it's not the pedagogy that's important, it's the content. So that brings us to the online classes. The Department of Education audited a few students at our college that failed or dropped an online class and determined that it didn't have regular and substantive interaction. And they wanted their money back. So we panicked and said, we'll work with our faculty, we'll teach them how to incorporate academic content, we'll teach them how to interact with students on a regular basis. And so they gave us a year, and we're going to have to self-evaluate all our classes, all our online classes, to make sure they include regular and substantive interaction. The state and federal code differentiates between online courses and correspondence courses. Correspondence courses do not receive federal aid. So you have to be careful that your online class is not dubbed as a correspondence course because it has no RSI. So our academic senate took on the project to define what is regular, what is substantive, what is interaction, and what it is not. It's very difficult to achieve.
This is a difference of two consecutive squares. Lots of interesting things there. I'm waiting for your answer. 27. Anyway, this is the book. If you're interested in the stories, talk to me, email me. I'll be happy to discuss it anytime, anywhere, in any language.
I'm getting it on my phone. I heard. Yeah!
Hi, I'm Wendy Pagoda from Hillsborough Community College, and I just want to talk about the whole order mattering thing, combinations and permutations. So typical questions we ask is like, how many ways can we select 5 students out of a class of 20? How many ways can 8 friends sit at a bar with only 4 seats? Or how many ways can 15 make a committee of 10 with 1 secretary and 2 co-chairs? And obviously that one's a lot harder. So we ask our students, does order matter? To start this question off. Yes, permutations, no combinations. And so we'll give them a question and we'll say, hey, does order matter? Is this combinations or permutations? And then this usually happens. Some say combinations, some say permutations, and the rest are just confused. So let's look at a particular question. How many ways can we knock down 8 pins when bowling? We know it's combinations because order doesn't matter, right? Seriously? Yeah, of course. Order doesn't matter. The order in which the pins were knocked down doesn't matter, not the order of the pins themselves. So this question's inherently confusing for students. So students will start looking for keywords. Sample is combinations, racing is permutations, committee is combinations. But keywords are not the best way to solve questions. It doesn't really address understanding, we know that. And the keywords themselves can be misleading. Even with racing, we can have permutations, combinations, or some mixture of them, depending on how we give out the prize. So we have this wonderful formula, number of distinguishable permutations, and this wonderful formula is often used to rearrange letters of words like Mississippi. Great formula, 11 factorial different ways to rearrange 11 letters. But 4 of the letters are S's, 4 of them are I's, it doesn't matter, let's divide them out. Well, we can address combinations that way as well. We have 20 racers. Let's say we want to give 3 of them a blue ribbon. That's a combination question. So let's line up the racers, just like a word. Eventually that'll catch up. All right, so line up the racers, give the first 3 blue ribbons, and let's create a word from that. BBB, LLL, L for loser, you know. All right. Anyway, so how many ways can we arrange these letters? That's just the word problem, like Mississippi. So that's going to be, I think it's a 20 racers, so 20 factorial divided by the 3 B's, because those don't matter. 17 L's, again, you can't tell the difference between them. That's really just our combination formula. So we get 1,140. We can do this with permutations as well, same idea. We have 20 racers. The top 3 get gold, silver, and bronze. The rest are, yeah. All right, anyway, so how many ways can we rearrange these letters? Same idea. Eventually it'll pop up. All right, there we go. So there's 20 racers divided by 1 factorial, 1 factorial, 1 factorial, 17 factorial. We recognize this is the permutation formula. Normally we don't write those 1s in there, but we could. There's no harm in that. And then we get our 6,840. What if we have 20 racers, the top 3 place, next 10 get You Rock ribbons, and everyone else gets Fabulous Effort? Another word. Why not, right? Okay, so let's rearrange the letters of that word. 20 factorial divided by 1 factorial, 1 factorial, 1 factorial, 10 factorial, 7 factorial. This question would be way more difficult if we didn't do it this way. In fact, that's the way we would do it. 20C13, 13C3, 3P3. That's how I was taught to do it. That is horrible. All right, so but if we have 20 employees, 13 are going to work on Christmas Eve, but 4 of those only have to work half day, 2 only work stopping in the morning. How many ways can we do this? Yeah, just create a table. I wouldn't bother with a word at that point. But there we go, 20 factorial, 7 factorial, 7 factorial, et cetera, et cetera. We get about 70 billion different ways, but it's a fairly simple calculation, really, with a calculator. Better than that, at least. All right, so as far as the benefits of doing it this way, we have one formula that just always works. There's a built-in self-check since the sum of the numbers on the bottom would equal the top. It explains why 0 factorial is 1, because there's no Z's in Mississippi, right? So you see, actually understand that. I'm not advocating let's not teach NCR, NPR. It definitely is a nice shortcut, but let's just do it after number of distinguishable permutations instead of just de-emphasizing that. And that's, I think, about it. Yes, and that's my contact information.
There's another presenter that needed an audio portion that I hope will work. So
They were the only 2 entertaining slides.
cross your fingers, Ann.
Okay, so I'm Ann Magnuson. I am from Wake Tech Community College in Raleigh, North Carolina, and I'm going to share my experience storyboarding. So that's the first thing you do when you create an instructional video. So why am I storyboarding? It's the first step in creating instructional videos. I'm part of a redesigning pre-calculus Title III grant. And we've been working with an instructional designer, Jennifer Staniger. And that's the first thing we do. Okay, so this is a storyboard, so this is an example. This is a sketch of how visual elements are displayed in sequence along with narration. So in the one column is my PowerPoint presentation. In the column on the left, the narration for each slide that's going to appear in the video. So here's my actual first draft. So I sat with Jennifer and I read the narrations on the left, or your right, or whatever, and as she advanced the PowerPoint slides. Welcome to Wake Tech Pre-Calculus Algebra. Sorry, it worked. Yeah, right there. Welcome to Wake Tech Pre-Calculus Algebra. Hello, I'm Ann Magnuson, and this is MAT 171, Module 2, Lesson 1. Don't sound like that. This is what it reminded me of.
Hello, I'm Dr. Sheldon Cooper, and welcome to the premiere episode of Sheldon Cooper Presents Fun with Flat.
Okay, so this leads me to my next slide. Don't be boring. Don't sound like me. One of the first guidelines for narration that Jennifer taught me was to use your voice to project enthusiasm. So it's kind of hard to be enthusiastic about this slide because it's about evaluating functions, but I have to practice and listen to myself. And so anyway, the next guideline that Jennifer talked to me about was how to word your learning objective in your video. So our videos are based on one learning objective. So this was my learning objective. You'll learn how to find the unknown value given an input or an output from a given function that's described symbolically. So I thought that that might need a little rewording. So to put it in the vernacular of the students, instead of evaluating a function, plug into, you know. Then the next guideline would be to recall prior knowledge before you introduce new content. But this video is called the just-in-time video, so it actually is prior knowledge. So it was a little bit hard to come up with that. So just going over the vocabulary. What is the symbolic function? The input, the output. A lot of kids have not heard of the term symbolic function. I want to get across the point that it's just a formula. So another point that Jennifer pointed out is that with videos or PowerPoint, visual is very important. So a visual representation of a symbolic function I threw in there. I don't think she was real impressed with my artwork. The next guideline is then you present, after your learning objective, after your prior knowledge, you present 2 or 3 examples. So here's my symbolic description. So the box on the top is my narration, and then that's my slide that goes along with it. And so I wanted to start off with the area of a circle because that's a formula everybody understands. I want them to see that the symbolic function that I'm talking about is really, can be thought of as a formula. So this was my next slide to discuss evaluating at the input. But Jennifer brought up the point, well, if you see area of a circle on a slide, what do you think of? You want to see a circle. So I inserted some visuals to show that the different radii are going to give me a different area, a larger circle, and I shaded them to kind of get across the point it's area that I'm interested in. But then I got kind of worried that they would think those circles were the actual graph of the function. So again, time for another visual. So I added the graph of the area function, and I included the 2 points on it that correspond to the different radii. And then finally, the last slide, I needed to show getting the input from a given output, and it's all about solving an equation. And these equation steps would reveal, you know, on delay. So my takeaways for this, using best practices for instructional design, you want to use a lot of visual elements in your videos, you want to record a natural sounding script, and universal design, and just don't sound boring like I did. Thank you.
All right, Scott McLendon from Somerset Community College. Now you might know some of these learning tools up here, Mike. We talked about that in one of our talks. And I don't know where you stand on a couple of these. If you've seen Slater before, go slater.com. Basically, it tells you it lets you pick your textbook, and then it tells you how to solve every problem. And MathPix is the app that lets you take a picture with your smartphone, and it solves the question for you. Now, you could be on both sides of the fence here of, is that really a learning tool? And it can be. But this, my friends, is not. Okay? It doesn't matter where you stand. Go to noneedtostudy.com, where our online class taking experts are taking classes online, getting straight A's for our students like you all day, every day. Now, it's a very slick website. I suggest you go to it. And there's a little request a price button right there. So that's what I did. I did a little undercover boss kind of action. So I asked, how much is this going to cost? And if you can see in the back, I get this lovely lady, and this is the picture that comes with the email. It says, thanks for your request. How can we help you out with your college algebra course? Well, I've got a college algebra course. I'm failing it horribly. It's hopeless. I can't make it. What can you do for me? How much? But now I do say that the final exam is proctored. And she says, no problem. Send me a syllabus. So I take one of my colleagues from AMATYC, slap his name on my syllabus, and send it to her. I say again, I say, well, I have a proctored final, because that's basically what we have in our Math 1, our college algebra course, is a proctored final. Well, she was wanting to know how many assignments how much time is this going to take my quote-unquote tutor to figure out, and I said, well, I don't know, I dropped it, so none of the assignments was in the syllabus that I sent her. We don't do that at our school. We don't put the assignments and dates and due dates and things. Here you go. She needs a course for a definite price, but it'll be around $700.
10 or 20 of those.
Now, it's a guaranteed A. The hush falls in the crowd. Now, the class has a proctored final. I keep on, because that, I think, is my protection. In my online courses, we have to have those students come in and take a proctored face-to-face, one-on-one at the assessment centers. Do y'all use ProctorU? Anybody use ProctorU? I see a few folks. Well, she's got the answer to that. She basically says we can definitely help out with that proctored final if it's done through ProctorU. I don't know how. Now, 3 or so years ago, I gave the same talk at our AMATYC Ignite session, and this was the picture I got from her that time. And she said that this was guaranteed to work. And even if we don't use ProctorU, we have to schedule a time at our assessment center on campus. I have to take an ID with me. This is what I asked last time. Her response was, find out more if you have anything to prevent cheating. We've had success at testing centers. If it's a one-on-one thing, it might be an issue. So, $700 ain't cheap, even for anybody. So I asked her, I said, well, they use a lockdown browser, which we do use. It's a small lab. That's basically what we do at our school. Well, we can try to make it happen, but in case there is no guarantee for success. So that makes me think that they actually have ways of getting around this. But listen, you don't need that. Go to Craigslist. Get a used sofa, serial killer, whoever you want to get. But they do have folks go to lessons and tutoring. There are folks local folks that will take your online course. This is coast to coast from South Carolina to California. In my case, it's Lexington in the middle. This is even more dangerous because this person will take the course, show up at the assessment center, and how hard do you think it is with Photoshop to make a fake ID? Ooh, easy peasy, right? So, listen, who's in your online math course? Who is it? I don't know. Shameless plug, McClendonMath@youtube.com. Listen, what do you call a cow with 3 legs? Lean beef. Thank you very much.
Quote from Benoit Mandelbrot.
It is working. It's auto-advancing.
Fractals are not pathological at all. In fact, they're the rule of the universe. Shapes which are not fractals are the exception. I love Euclidean geometry, but it's quite clear that it does not give a reasonable presentation of the world. Mountains are not cones, clouds are not spheres, trees are not cylinders, neither does light travel in a straight line. Almost everything around us is non-Euclidean. I was stoked about fractals so much in the early 90s when I wrote this thesis, my master's thesis in San Diego State. Everybody signed off and everybody loved it, except my actual advisor was quizzing me more than everyone else was. Because he wasn't sure that fractals were going to be the wave of the future like I was. You can tell on, what's this called? This is Euclidean,
Snowflake,
and that's fractal. I'm zooming into both of them right now. They're both so similar. Fractal dimension, some sort of linear scaling thing compared to how many pieces it takes. That snowflake took 4 pieces, even though it's scaled by 3. So a combination of 4 and 3 makes for interesting dimensions. And you can go find 120 different fractal dimensions on Wikipedia now. It's amazing how many people have contributed to this knowledge base that wasn't there in 1992. But they're designed in different ways. There's so many ways. You talk about broccoli and cauliflower have different fractal dimensions. I was sure there was something called Fractals in Science, Pilot Edition. There was Fractals Everywhere by Michael Barnsley. I was sure that this is a wave of the future. One big important thing about fractals is they use a feedback loop, kind of like this microphone right now. And the complex plane, you use a feedback loop to make the Mandelbrot set. Because math should be more interesting than just plug in X to get out Y and be done with it. In reality, there's a lot of feedback loops in nature. Here's a little history of fractals. Before the name was invented, these people came up with these monstrous things. This book, Chaos, really got me turned on to it. But then there's these coffee table books. Oh, these 2 guys both invented the Julia set, but only one had his name associated with it. And it's kind of because they felt bad for him because he lost his nose. 1967 was the first time that fractal dimension was discussed, but the word fractal wasn't yet invented then. I got coffee table books. I got software. It's 1975, the word fractal was finally invented, but it was in French. It wasn't until 2 years later that it came out in English. Now you know. He's got a duck. Fractal horizons. Fractals in your future. The future use of fractals. An eye for fractals. So people started talking about this more and more. I got his autograph. I got a Mandelbrot autograph when I was attending a conference in San Francisco. Wow. My buddy at American River College, Tony Barcelos, made it known to the mathematics community, and he did an interview, and he approved this slide. Look at this. When you see this graph, aren't you sure that we can extrapolate a little bit more into the future and say that fractal is going to be as popular as calculus? I was. Look at this. 0 for results as of last month. When I put these slides together, sorry, no results. Did you mean the word practical? Did you mean the word factual? 2 major publishers fail to even acknowledge that this word exists. So a little bit sad. So I was windsurfing in 1982. I bought my first 1980, what's it called, TI-83 calculator in 1982 at Grossmont College. Cuyamaca College was the first place that hired me to teach community college. I love 1992. I love my wife. It was the year we got married. That's when my thesis got published. We were all doing this in San Diego. The reason I wanted to show you this slide is to promote that everybody comes to San Diego next year and has a good time. It's a great place to be.